it or not. Who knows? He's got a plan though, and I'm
No, we
excited.
didn't type. I was going to recite the whole thing to you, did we?
Yeah, in Greek, please, because that would be better. Not. Good morning. And I loved, Father Wallace, I loved how you chose so many different words to unpack. It's one of my favorite sermon pieces of let's talk about that word. Well done this morning. Well, even though you had the Gospel of Luke today, because we get those too, don't we?
Yeah. John's going to come in here a couple of times this year. Yeah, with Mark we get a little more John, don't we?
Yeah, we get, because Mark is short.
I wasn't paying attention in seminary. Yeah, you can't really fill up a whole year with Mark.
No. Well, you could go very slowly through Mark, but it sort of is like the opposite of what he does. Everything's immediate.
Yeah.
All right, Father Wallace. Here comes Joanne. It's so good to be here. I'm gonna hush my mouth, put myself back on mute like normal.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I hope everybody had a good year. Happy New Year. Good Christmas. I know Abby and I weren't here last week, but we were having a good time at our respective spots. But Father Dave held down the house. I hope he was containable. I hope y'all were able to control him. But I hope it was a good time if you were with us. Today I want to talk about Mark, and the downside of doing this is painting in such broad brushstrokes. And so we're going to do that. If you're an EFMer in here, I'm going to ask you to get ready to talk. If you've done EFM, in particularly year two. Isn't it year two? Yeah, it's year two, right? Old Testament year one, year two is New Testament. So maybe we'll pull some of these things and you remember some of the stuff. I'm going to share my screen. Share my screen. Gospel PowerPoint. Optimize screen for share computer sound. That's what I want to do right here. Everybody see me? Slideshow. There we go. So let's talk about Mark. This might not take that long. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do here, but I want to open with a prayer. And so let's go ahead and pray. I'll pray it, but you can follow along. This prayer for Saint Mark. I forgot the feast day, what day it is specifically, but you can look it up. But there's a feast day for Saint Mark, and here's the collect for it. Let us pray. Almighty God, by the hand of Mark the evangelist, you have given your church the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. We thank you for this witness and pray that we may be firmly grounded in its truth. Through Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. So, we can pick out some really fun things in this collect. There's a reason, if you join my Thursday Bible study, we play around with collects quite a bit as we do the readings for the week. So maybe things to look at in this collect. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, will be something very important as we talk about Mark's gospel. So you would circle that. That's a big phrase. This witness, thank you for this witness, something he's going to witness to, being grounded in the truth. All of these are really important words. So as we begin looking at Mark. So today's class, here's what I want to do. Probably 30 minutes. Although, I don't want to go 40 minutes. I'm going to keep the clock right here. 30 minutes. Background, brief background, broad brushstrokes today, probably pretty short. An outline of Mark, since we're going to be hearing this all year long, and some of the major themes of Mark. Then my favorite Bible project videos, just because those are the things my students enjoyed and I really enjoyed them. I think they cover a lot of, they make these videos for like 9 minutes, eight minutes. They're really packed full of great information. I know people disagree with some stuff, whatever. Everybody disagrees with something. So, but to animate it and do such a good job of covering the content and showing how it builds upon things. I'm going to end with that. And then hopefully you'll see some of the things that I've talked about from the outline to the major themes will be in that video. Then we can have a larger conversation about Mark and some things we might see and hear this year. So let me go back and say, Mark, we started Mark in Advent. Advent 1 is we began this new year. We're year B. A is Matthew, B is Mark, C is Luke, right? And we get John interspersed in there. I'm saying that right, Abby. You correct me if I start wandering off the radar here or reservation. So we started Mark. We didn't have Mark today, but we'll hear more of Mark and particularly in the summertime, once we get into Pentecost, Mark, 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 Mark. So today, let's kind of talk about Mark. Well, here's what scholars say. We don't know anything. Welcome to scholarship. It's inconclusive. It's always inconclusive. Somebody's trying to enter the waiting room here. So we don't have firm evidence of who wrote Mark. So you can go back to a second century source claiming that Mark was one of Peter's people, was one of Peter's interpreters at the end of Peter's life. I think that that is, that could be that'll be one interpretation, one of the earliest interpretations. He doesn't ever say his name is Mark. We don't even have this idea that this is a gospel of Mark. It's nowhere in the text does it say this is the gospel of Mark. That's been one of the historical claims, was that this was somebody who was connected with Peter, and we're seeing that about year one something in the second century. So others are going to say this is John Mark. We do see John Mark. We see John Mark in a lot of Paul's travels. So this could have been somebody with Paul. Now, and then ultimately nobody really knows, but a lot of folks claiming John Mark might have been someone with Paul. And there's so one thing on for it being kind of connected with Peter is, so here's a couple of interpretive sort of things here. Is we see this, we're going to be talking. We can talk about the Greek, that it's not a high level of Greek, and it also doesn't do well with Judaism. So they wonder if this is somebody associated with Peter that didn't know a lot about Judaism. That maybe John Mark, who was with Paul, might have known a little more. So there's all this kind of back and forth with scholars. In the end, it's unknown. So let's talk about some of the things you're going to see in this. So some say that it lacks content or polish, and this is one of the reasons that this gospel is kind of neglected. It's not like Matthew or Luke. Luke is this beautiful Luke Acts, or John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. That's so poetic. I mean, we had to talk about memorizing Greek, as Abby was telling me about Greek words. I think I took Greek at Sewanee at the School of Theology, and I bet Richard Smith made you all. Did you take it with him? So you had to memorize the opening prologue in Greek, and it's poetic, right? It's really good stuff. John is not like that. John is a little like some of those bad papers that I read in high school. So we only have a few fragments that survive from before the 4th century. Is another kind of sort of issue with this. St. Augustine of Hippo. So some historical issues with it is saying that, hey, Mark is really just an abbreviation of Matthew. So if you can't get the Cliff Notes version if you want the Cliff Notes version of Matthew, read Mark, is what some of the scholars, some of the great theologians will say. It's just a smaller version. About 90. So as you study Mark, about 90 something, I mean, it's 90 something. Abby can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going by memory here. 90 something percent of Mark is in Matthew. And Matthew will just bring a lot more of the Hebrew scriptures into Mark. So there's a reason early church fathers and mothers said, hey, this is just kind of a shorter version. It was also, as we're about to see, something that could easily be spoken. I mean, I joked around by saying I was going to read all of Mark. I'm not going to read all of Mark, but it could be, you could easily read Mark. And I've heard people, I think I have heard it read once before. It's easier to memorize. So I've seen somebody memorize it and recite it. So we're coming from an oral tradition. Many will claim this is the earliest gospel, and one of the reasons is it could be memorized and spoken orally, and that's why it's brevity. It's difficult to interpret, so you will see some of the wordages in here that you would tell the story, that you could do this orally, because it has, almost like Shakespeare, it almost has got it's got lines in it that could help you connect one story to the next. So that'll be one of the reasons it's difficult to interpret. There's a story within a story. I'll talk about this later, this intercalatation. I'll say a little more about what that means. So he's going to use these methods to help people maybe memorize it, but also to kind of lay some of the important themes down. So earliest gospel, short, maybe not the best Greek, but yet as time goes on, people are finding this extremely dense, extremely complex, and really, I think, pretty amazing stuff. Let me share my classroom slide with you. Okay, so I did this all the time. I taught English to seniors who were not happy to be in English. And I'm scared to do this stuff with Claire because I know Claire's really got a strong master's in creative writing. So don't you have a master's in creative writing or something like that? Okay, here we are. So, and so she beats me up on Tuesday whenever we're in staff meeting. This is why. I'm just about to butcher something and I'm about to confess to something. So I had English students who did not like English. Okay, they were the math and biology kids. And I said, take any novel. Oh, Claire, I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm confessing here. Take any novel, run it through the old classic narrative arc. I was like, you can do, I was like, so when you're in college and you're writing papers, and this is bad, confessing, I said, you could take, if it's 300 pages, go to page 150, give or take 20 pages, and you'll find the climax of the novel. So we did this with a couple of novels, and yeah, the last novel I had them read was what was Where the Crawdads Sing, because their second semester seniors, it was a pandemic. I mean, so I was trying to be nice, and sure enough, there was one of the big sex scenes in the middle, and they're like, "Yeah, Mr. Marsh, you're right." And I'm like, "No, I'm so fired," but thankfully, Father Davis hired me. So you could, you can see. I mean, there's something even in popular literature, right? That it's got to have a good structure to keep people engaged, and so Mark has really got this. And so I really do want you to go back to your old school 8th grade days and pay attention throughout this year to the beginning, to the smack dab center. And at the smack dab center of the 16 chapters, I should have put these in there. You got 16 chapters. One's going to start pretty big, and there's going to be a lot of rising action. At the smack dab center is something very important. It is the Transfiguration, and Jesus is kind of chapter 8, Transfiguration, at the end of 7, 8, right kind of in the middle of the word count. Transfiguration, Jesus kind of talking about death. And then from there on out, he's running to Jerusalem. So it's split in half. And so, and then kind of the cross and the empty tomb is this resolution. So we'll talk about the ending. So it follows a very classic narrative arc, is what I'm trying to say, in a way that probably the other gospels do, but this is, I mean, it's right divisible by word count. Many scholars will say right here is in the middle is the Transfiguration. And when, if you were listening to this orally, somebody speaking this, which some people would do, you would have taken a break. That's intermission. Transfiguration is intermission. I'm talking more than I want to, but I'm getting excited. We're back in the narrative. So remember this. Go back to this as you see your way through Mark. Anything before 8 is, and the whole thing is to move toward Jerusalem. That becomes very, very important, from Galilee to Jerusalem. I'll show you more about that. So here it is. Here's kind of the narrative arc. I got this. I stole this online. I thought it looked pretty cool because he's using segments of 3. This kind of new kingdom here. In the different ways this is moving from the Son of God all the way down to the there it is, the second chapter. So kind of 3 acts is what many will say. Act 1, the new kingdom. We have a new king, we have a new kingdom, we have a new order, and then you're moving to these 3 deaths as he's starting to move toward Jerusalem, as you see on this slide. The 3 predictions, and then you move into Jerusalem, and ultimately toward the cross. It's kind of a long way there. And you'll see as we get to the bottom part of this, these other endings, these short and these long endings here. So we'll talk about that in a second. This is one of the big things scholars love about Mark. It's got multiple endings. So pay attention to these moves there again. So this new kingdom here. Oh, something going on.
You said there are multiple endings. Does Jesus not rise at the end of one of them?
No, he does rise in the end, but whether he hangs around and talks. So sorry, time out.
No, it's multiple okay. Endings. It's okay.
Multiple endings. Yes. He runs off with Mary Magdalene. No. That's Dan Brown. Sorry. No. So there are multiple endings in the sense of the tomb is empty, and we'll talk about this. Or does he continue? Does he continue appearing to the disciples? And there's a ton of debate about whether or not you'll see in Mark 16:8, where many believe it really ends. the tomb is empty and the women leave in fear and trembling, and how that can be very important for this gospel. We don't need to see him again. So we'll talk about that. Maybe that's a great discussion. Abby, bring that up for the discussion. So here you are, the first part, 1 through 8, setting up this new order. Here we have this new king sets on we don't have the birth story. So the Christmas story in here in Mark. That's why we don't hear it on Christmas. We Luke and Matthew for the good stuff. Mark, it's not there. As he's moving toward 8, these predictions of his death, as I talked about in the Transfiguration, it'll happen more. Some more healings as he's moving toward Jerusalem, and then on the cross. I use this image. I hope this isn't the Mel Gibson one, but it could be. And it's really important because the Roman centurion right there. So we'll talk about the cross maybe in a second as we watch that video. The Roman centurion at the bottom of that cross in Mark's gospel say, truly, this was the Son of God, connecting with that very opening line. So watch that kind of confession here. So some literary things, as Abby was mentioning earlier, before we get to this video. So the style and the structure, the Greek in the best Greek, as I've said, and these words right here. We're going to talk about this in the discussion. And. Kind of like, what was it the girls were saying a long time ago? The words they used to repeat all the time. Oh, I forgot. It's almost like I forgot what was one of the popular words in the people were repeating over and over again. About when I was taking Greek. What was it, Claire? Oh yeah, it was a couple of years ago. They just kept saying it, maybe it was, and appears probably 1,000 times and immediately appears probably 500. I'm making that up, but it feels like that if you're reading in Greek. If you can translate the word and in Greek, you've pretty much got half the gospel. Is what it feels like. So there's a pace and a cadence to this gospel, as Mother Abby was alluding to, that is very fast.
Do you remember the movie And Then?
Exactly.
And then?
Exactly. So that could be annoying as you hear it on Sundays. Sets of 3. You'll see this hopefully in the video. There's tons of sets of 3s. 3 is important. Obviously, 3 is a very important structure, but there's going to be 3 parables of the 3 seed parables, 3 opinions on who this John the Baptist is, 3 passion predictions, as I've already talked about, 3 failures to stay awake in the garden, 3 denials, and all these intercalations, which is these stories that are set in 3. And I'll talk about that maybe in the discussion. You're going to have this open ending that I just mentioned. Why is it important that the women leave in fear and trembling? Why is it important that we maybe don't see Jesus? Or is it important? I mean, somebody maybe wrote that in there. So if you go to your Bibles, you can look at that. In the sudden beginning, where's the baby Jesus? As Ricky Bobby would say, I like the baby Jesus. Well, you don't get the baby Jesus, Ricky. Ricky Bobby, he's not here. You get this Son of God in baptism, kind of stepping onto the stage as this kind of 30-year-old man ready to kind of take on this new ministry. None of the 12-year-old boy in the temple. We don't have that today, although we are going to get some conversation with his mother, and I think in this gospel as well. So you've got the sudden beginning. The other thing you have is a lot of apocalyptic stuff. We got that in Advent, so we don't have to go back and rehash that. This end of the world stuff, this kingdom is coming. Also a good bit of irony. The irony in this is the insiders don't really know, and the outsiders do. It's usually the demons that claim him the Son of God, and the insiders who call him teacher, right? Rabbi. And so, and then finally, there's this great sense of mystery from the ending to the beginning. Mystery kind of permeates this this whole gospel. The people who know and people who don't know. That's a beauty. That's one of the great words in this gospel. So I'll shut up and try to play this. Can y'all hear this?
The Gospel according to Mark. It's one of the first accounts of the life of Jesus, and our earliest historical traditions link this book to a Christian scribe named Mark, or John Mark. He was a co-worker with Paul and a close partner with Peter. And in fact, an ancient church historian named Papias, he recalls that Mark had collected all of the eyewitness accounts and memories of Peter and then shaped them into this account. But Mark didn't just randomly throw the pieces together. He's carefully designed this story of Jesus. In the first line of the book, Mark makes this claim about Jesus. It's the beginning of the good news about Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of God. Now, what's interesting is that this is the only time Mark is going to tell you what he thinks. For the rest of the book, he's going to influence you by simply putting Jesus's actions and words in front of you, showing you how other people react to him. Now, Mark designed the story of Jesus as a drama with 3 acts. The first one set in Galilee, the third one is set in Jerusalem, and the second act shows Jesus on the way from one place to the other. And each of the acts focuses on a repeated theme. So in Act 1, everybody's blown away by Jesus, and they're wondering, who is this Jesus? In Act 2, it's the disciples who are struggling to understand what it means for Jesus to be the Messiah. And then in Act 3, we watch the surprising paradox of how Jesus becomes the Messianic King. Let's just dive in and you'll see how it unfolds. After the opening line, Mark begins with a quotation from the ancient prophets Isaiah and Malachi, who said that God would send a messenger to Israel to prepare them for when God would show up himself to rescue his people and become their king. And Mark introduces John the Baptist as that messenger, and then right when you expect God to show up personally, Mark introduces Jesus. And as he comes onto the scene, the heavens open, God's Spirit descends on Jesus, and God says, "You are my beloved Son." After this, Mark places in front of us a summary of Jesus' core message. He went about Galilee announcing the good news that God's kingdom has come near. Jesus is carrying forward the story from the Old Testament scriptures about God's rescue operation for his world. Through Jesus, God is restoring his reign over the world by confronting and defeating evil and its hold on people's lives, and then by inviting them to live under his reign by following Jesus. From here, Mark's given us a big block of stories showing us Jesus' power as he brings God's kingdom. He goes about healing people whose bodies are sick or broken or under the oppression of dark spiritual powers. And Jesus even does something that for Jewish people only God has the right to do. He forgives people's sins. And Jesus' actions here produce lots of different responses. So some people follow him and become his disciples. Other people don't know what to think, and still others reject him completely, especially Israel's leaders who accuse him of blaspheming God and being empowered by evil. But Jesus isn't surprised by these responses. In fact, he draws attention to it. In chapter 4, Mark has collected many of Jesus' parables about the hidden, mysterious nature of God's kingdom. And Jesus says that his message is like seed falling on different types of soil. Some are receptive, some are not. Or it's like a mustard seed that's very tiny. It seems insignificant, but then it grows huge and surprises everyone. Jesus' point is that he really is the Messiah, bringing God's kingdom, but it doesn't look like what anybody expected. And this growing confusion about Jesus among the crowds is connected to a key idea Mark emphasizes at the end of Act 1, that even among Jesus' disciples there's confusion. Even they are struggling to grasp who Jesus really is, and that brings us to Act 2. It begins with a crucial conversation. Jesus takes the disciples aside and he asks, "Who do you all say that I am?" And Peter speaks up saying, "You're the Messiah." But it becomes clear that for Peter, this means that Jesus is a victorious military king from the line of David who will rescue Israel from the Romans. But for Jesus to be the Messiah means that he's the suffering servant king of Isaiah 53, who will bring God's rule by giving up his life in Jerusalem. And the disciples, they don't get it. They think following King Jesus is going to mean fame and status and importance, and Jesus makes it clear that following him is actually like dying, like carrying your own cross. It means rejecting violence and pride and selfishness and giving one's life out for others in acts of service and love. He has the same conversation with them 2 more times, and it all culminates in Jesus' important statement that the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to become a servant and give his life as a ransom for many. The disciples still don't get it. They respond in confusion and fear. And so here in Act 2, Mark has placed another key story that echoes the book's introduction. Jesus takes 3 of his disciples up to a mountain, and he's suddenly transformed. He's radiating with light and glory, and a cloud envelops them. Now, this is just like the glory of the God of Israel that showed up long ago on Mount Sinai. And then the 2 prophets who stood in God's presence on Mount Sinai, Moses and Elijah, they appear next to Jesus as God announces again, "This is my beloved Son." Now, by placing this story in the middle of all these conversations in Act 2, Mark is making an astounding claim that Jesus, God's Son, is the physical embodiment of God's own glory. And in Jesus, the glorious God of Israel is going to become king by suffering and dying for the sins of his own people. It's a puzzling claim that confuses and scares the disciples as they leave the mountain. Which brings us to Act 3. Jesus makes a very public royal entry into Jerusalem for Passover. People are hailing him as the Messiah. Then he enters into the temple courtyard and he asserts his royal authority by running out the thieves and crooks and stopping the sacrificial system. Then this kicks off a whole week of Jesus debating and confronting the leaders of Israel, condemning their hypocrisy, and so they set in motion a plan to have him killed. And Jesus warns his disciples, predicting that Jerusalem and its temple will be destroyed within a generation, and his disciples will be persecuted just like him, until he returns one day to bring God's kingdom fully over the world. And it all leads up to the final night. Jesus has his last Passover meal with the disciples, a symbolic meal that told the story of Israel's liberation from slavery through the death of the Passover lamb. And Jesus takes these symbols and he gives them new meaning. They point to the liberation from sin and death that will happen through the death of the suffering servant Messiah. From here, the story rushes forward to Jesus' arrest, his trial before Israel's priests and the Roman governor Pilate, all resulting in Jesus' crucifixion. And it culminates in a key scene that matches the important scenes from Acts 1 and 2, except this time it's darkness that descends, not a cloud. And instead of the divine voice from heaven, it's Jesus' voice crying out before he dies. And then most surprising is that it's a Roman soldier who sees Jesus die, who grasps and then announces who Jesus is. This man was the Son of God. He's the first person in the story to recognize the story's shocking claim about Jesus' identity, that it's the crucified Son of God who's the Messiah, Jesus of Nazareth, who died for his friends and for his enemies. After this, Jesus' body is placed in a tomb, and on the first day of the new week, 2 women from his disciples come to the tomb, and they discover that the tomb is empty, the stone's rolled away, and an angelic man informs them that Jesus isn't here, that he's risen from the dead. And so he orders them to go and tell this good news to the other disciples, that Jesus is alive, that he'll meet them back up in Galilee. And the women, they're freaked out. Mark says that they fled from the tomb in terror, telling no one, for they were afraid. And that's how the book ends, with Jesus' disciples showing the same kind of fear and confusion that concluded Acts 2 and 1. Now, if you look in your Bible, you'll see that the Gospel of Mark has more to its ending, where Jesus appears, he speaks to his disciples, but there's also a note there telling you that that ending is not part of the original book, that it's only found in later, less reliable manuscripts. Now, it's possible that the original ending got lost, or that Mark actually never finished writing his account, but it's more likely that this abrupt ending is intentional to make a point. The entire story has focused on the shocking claim that puzzled Jesus' disciples from beginning to end, that it's the suffering, crucified, and risen Jesus who's the Messiah, the Son of God. That God's love and upside-down kingdom were revealed as Jesus died for the sins of the world. And so this story ends without closure, and it forces you, the reader, to grapple with this very strange and scandalous claim about Jesus. And are you going to run away like the disciples? Or are you going to recognize Jesus as your king and go and tell the good news? And only you can answer that question. And that's what the Gospel of Mark is all about.
He reminds me a lot of J. Botham and his cartoons telling the
Yeah.
story when he was here in February and drew his children's homily. Great job, Wallace.
I like those are, yeah, you can see I had to use those a lot in Old Testament because there are a lot of things running along in some of these Old Testament books, and they've got tons of commentaries, and I find them to be very helpful in the sense of, yeah, the illustrations and the connections of a lot of these things. So you see some of those things, and I like to have a discussion on those. I said 11:30, and it's 11:32. So some of the things we can talk about is this sense of urgency and immediacy, as Abby kind of mentioned in the beginning, and maybe even that ending, how that kind of plays into that. Let's talk about this mystery and ambiguity. Why is this thing so weird? Why do people not understand? Remember, why do people not understand his identity? How come it takes so long for the disciples, and how even maybe Mark connects that at the end? We'll also see this Jesus is very human. He didn't get into a lot of that in the video, but you will see a very, very human Jesus, kind of sometimes even uncertain of what he's supposed to be doing. His family certainly wonders who the heck he is, as he reacts to some of these claims of people not really knowing. So you'll see a very the human side of Jesus, also the divine side as well. But that's the whole gospel tension there, right? A lot of boundary crossing. So when I come back to that intercalation, you'll see him, with people that he should healing, and this is some of the stuff that gets him in trouble, is he's healing people that he shouldn't be healing. And again, we can talk about this drive toward the cross. I mean, from basically chapter 8 on, it is a fast move, and you know where you're going. I'm heading to Jerusalem. I'm heading to Jerusalem, and you'll hear that throughout the year in some of the gospel readings. As he was on his way, where was he going? It will always be Jerusalem. So this movement toward the cross that Mark wants to say over and over again. And finally, this idea of God's faithfulness is one of the big themes we can talk about. Faithfulness, even in the midst of our incompetence, faithfulness to us, through the denials, through all that stuff. This is a theme that will reappear over and over again. So I will stop the share and we can have a conversation. I think I've seen some things in the chat. There's also a phone number here that wants to be admitted. Okay, here we go. Here we go. So some of the things in discussion. Anything you want to talk about on the video? I can hear. Okay, good stuff. No pressing. Does the guy do these videos on all books of the Bible? Jim Messer, yeah, he does. It's Bible Project. That's in the chat. He does word studies. He does everything. I think he's devoted his life to doing these sort of things. So I find that to be very, very helpful, and particularly EFMers, they can be very helpful as well. And high school students enjoy those as well. So EFMers, any sort of, if you've studied Mark, any sort of thoughts or any sort of things to go back to some of those important concepts. Anything about the video that struck you?
Wallace, I had forgotten about the threes, and often when we hear, you hear the triplets in sort of one space, but you don't hear them with the broad vision, which is that beautiful reminder of, a Sunday morning, we hear such a small pericope that sometimes in focusing on our own study of that, we miss the larger incorporation. You did a great job today, sort of incorporating it all in, and sort of that importance of reading. Mark is the easiest to read all the way through, but hearing the echoes that are intentional in the writing style and also by the author's intention. So thank you for reminding us of the triplets, those three pieces that are over and over again.
Yeah, thank you, Abby. And I think one of the things, and to kind of bring up what Mother Abby says, is one of the things you might hear us doing on a Sunday, particularly preachers, grabbing a story that you're just like, what in the heck? Is he recycling a sermon he used a couple of years ago? Why is he talking about this? And this is one of the things that we'll have to do in Mark. I think it's the context, particularly one of these really important healings. I'm going from memory here, so this is really bad. I would be a Baptist if I could do this from scriptural memory here. I think it's Jesus. What does he do? He heals. Heals a blind man, maybe. Then he stops the hemorrhaging woman, and then he raises the child. And so the blind man heals a blind man. I'm pretty sure this is it. So he heals a man. Man is the most high, right, in society. So you have to see those three together. So he takes the person of the most societal worth, the man, heals his blindness, or maybe he's a leper. So he kind of touches his skin, maybe, and then stops kind of a blood flow from a woman that could be catastrophic, and then raises a little girl who's worthless. So his miracles kind of increase as the value of the person in the Roman world decreases. Does that make sense? So you have to see those stories, and those three are all kind of bunched together. And so Mark is trying to really show you something in that theme, and I'm pretty certain that's Mark, and I can't tell you which verses those are, but that's the kind of stuff you'll see, as Mother Abby mentions, in the different gospel, in the different parables as well. So he'll do stuff like that all the time.
When Mark does, isn't it Mark who does progressions too, where there's healing of sight but not fully, and then is that in Mark, or is it a different one?
I think you're right. I definitely think you're right. Yeah, I mean, and the other crazy one is this, is the demons. The demons really know who he is. I mean, so part of the thing you saw in that video, like the disciples don't know, and everybody doesn't know. The religious people don't know, but the crazies, I mean, the town crazies are running around saying, "You're the Son of God. You're the Son of God." And they're like, don't say that about him. He's a good teacher. And so that's really one of the, and so the naked demoniac, right? There's some scholars like Luke Timothy Johnson here. This is a great book. He says, maybe it's the naked demoniac who has had this experience with Jesus. It's actually the guy in the tomb, the guy that's there, saying clothed in white at the end of this gospel. I like the interpretation. So Wendy, this puts I like the interpretation of abrupt ending of the book as an innovation of the reader to meditate on the paradox. Yeah, the ending. I find the ending is fascinating. Trying to remember, there was a sermon I heard about it once. It was a great sermon, and I can't remember why it was so funny. It was hysterical. Oh, I forgot the joke, but the ending is phenomenal. I love this ending. I love the mystery of it. It does make you. I think it invites you into the story. So thank you, Wendy, for that. It makes you a participant. You're there on that Easter morning, and you've experienced the empty tomb, and you didn't get to see him because nobody else gets to see him. I mean, and so you had this encounter, and this fear and this trembling it's this holy awe that sends you on your way to proclaim that good news. The series of the threes is also a reminder of the Trinity. Yeah, definitely. That's a great point. Yeah, so back to this, I think Kathy and Wendy, I think what you're getting at really is, those who claim this is a brief gospel, that you're not going to get a lot of detail. What you see, I think, is the structure. It's really this kind of intentional, every word is deliberate, even though the conjunctions maybe drive you crazy. Francis, were you trying to say something earlier?
Well, I'm always thinking, and once I start thinking, it comes right out. But when the overview that we got with all the illustrations ended, I wanted to clap. I felt so, and somebody had the know-how to say bravo. But then I've been thinking since then, I don't know where I heard this, or because I've just been exposed to a lot of reading during this pandemic, but they was talking about that studying the Bible, you can take two approaches, and one is like raking leaves, and the other is like planting shrubs or trees. And I was thinking, yeah, this would be so great. We could go through the Bible in just a matter of days by following this. I wish I knew his name, but I can't remember.
Tim Mackey, I think, right? Tim Mackey.
But in the meantime, I would hate to think that we were overlooking all the richness that is in there. So that's what I'm saying is, let's get all of the overviews we can, because I like, when I'm going to start a new book, I like to read on the back and see a little bit of the overview. But then you would not want to skip reading the book. And that's what my thoughts are.
So Francis, let me comment on that. I love to do, we Sunday in, Sunday out, is that Mother Abby mentioned, we get those pericopes, particularly in some of those Sundays in the summertime. I feel like, oh my gosh, we're moving so slowly, another Neville the Miracle. So where these have been very, in my own devotional life, I will say, coming back and stepping out and flying at maybe 20,000 feet to see kind of where we are, or maybe not 20,000, that's kind of high, but 10,000, just to kind of see that overarching narrative and where I am in this narrative is very helpful to kind of go back into it. and then enjoy the beauty of the words, of every single word, and every single aspect of where we are on that Sunday gospel passage. So I do recommend, as we launch the Mark, to return to this video. If you've never read this book, this is kind of a little pricey, but it could be, hey, we're still in quarantine, why not? The Writings in the New Testament by Luke Timothy Johnson. Abby, did Chris Bryan make you all read that as well? Because I think I took his class. He was still on this. This is a guy who's an Emory professor. He retired Emory professor, but the Sewanee faculty definitely used him. And he actually came to the cathedral a lot. He's Roman Catholic, but he came to the cathedral where I was for 7 years. And I wish we could have called him. I mean, had he not been a former Roman Catholic monk, we might have gotten him to be like our canon theologian. Just a great person of faith and a heck of a scholar. And you don't always find those together. Sorry. But he is one of those. Okay, so David Wheeler. I don't ever remember hearing, surprisingly, why Gospels were named for the disciples / apostles was to imbue them with authority. That's a good question. I mean, I do think, yeah, what we get from this, that it was much later in the history of this. It was 100, yeah, much later, a century later, that we get this this kind of idea that this connects with Mark. Yeah, and the writer of the fourth gospel, the beloved disciple. I mean, so there's a lot of ambiguity about that one as well. So maybe it is to imbue them with authority. I don't remember either. Thank you, Philip, for a link to the Bible Project. Might not be the link. Yeah, but I got to it somehow on YouTube. Any other questions? It's 11:45. Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff we're going to see throughout this year, but I just wanted to paint broadly there. I think there might have been another question in there, or another comment. Putting a plug for the Bible study. Yeah, the men's Bible study meets on Thursdays, 7 a.m. They discuss the upcoming passages. I do one on Thursday as well, Thursday at noon. So if you're not a 7 a.m. person for the men's Bible study, you can join me, or you're a woman, you can join me at noon as well. So we got a good group. Francis is part of that. I think some other folks are here. So we're going to go back, Kathy, we go back to the lectionary as well. Yeah, any other pressing questions on things I talked about? If not, we can leave a little earlier. Discussions or things that you have, that you've read, that you find helpful with Mark. We're just about to start it. So we started it, but we're about to keep on going. So don't be surprised if we do go to John. Don't talk yourself off of a ledge. Yes, ma'am, Abby.
I did want to say, you will continue the good book on Thursdays, and on Fridays, my study at 12 noon will actually begin a study of Presiding Bishop's book. I have it over here in the corner. The Way of Love is the Way. It's a play on the way of love, of course. But if you're looking for a study to start out the year, I wanted to let you know our book has changed. It will be this book. I believe it's 6 weeks, and I'm looking forward to all are welcome, 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock on Fridays through Zoom.
Yeah, a couple of other things. N.T. Wright's Mark for Everyone is a very good resource. Thank you, Dennis. N.T. Wright, one of the biblical scholars, he tends to translate things on his own, but nevertheless, he writes very good with some good discussion questions. Wednesday night, I'll be doing a class on essentialism for 2 weeks. So that's a fancy word for discernment, but it's a New York Times bestseller. And so kudos to the Greg McKeown, or McKean, however you say his name, for marketing that and making a lot of money. So it's a good book. I read it a couple of years ago. It's perhaps if you're starting New Year's resolutions, it could be a fun thing to do as well. So invite you to do that. Next week on Coffee Talk, we are putting some stuff together. Mother Abby and I need to talk, because I have issued an invite, and so, but we're making sure times work. If it's not this week, it'll be the following week. We might be talking about COVID and kind of the vaccine and going forward, but some more to come. Pay attention to the chimes on that. If it's not next week, it'll be the following week. And the other thing, really quickly, is just to kind of know that Growing in Grace, you'll hear more information about this, will be this platform. We'll be using Coffee Talk to kind of to do Growing in Grace this year. So it'll be exciting. We'll have some guest speakers. So stay on Coffee Talk. because it'll be a great way to kind of renew your faith. And so I think it'll be a fun time. It is 11:50. Any questions, comments about Mark? Class dismissed early today. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.
Thanks, Wallace. Great job.
See you all.
My bookstore, or excuse me, my book study's coming up. Just pay attention to the calendar. This is our week back in the office. So if you can't find that link today, don't worry. It'll be there by Tuesday afternoon, if not before.
We'll all be there by Tuesday.
I'll be there by Tuesday. We thank the staff took a full week off last week, for which we are very grateful for all of your understandings and patience. And I hope you guys got rest also in the in-betweens, even if it wasn't your holiday you had originally planned.
Wallace, it's Dan. Thanks very much. Great job.
Hey, Dan, good to see you. Take care, guys. Happy New Year.
Hey, Father William's doing a talk on Mark this Saturday. Did you get the email?
I've not got that email yet, so thank you.
If not, I'll send it to you.
I do get them, so thank you.
Yeah, but you can see it on YouTube. Thanks. Great job. I really enjoyed it.
Good to see you all.
Woo!
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Wallace. Shut us down, Claire. Shut us down.
Shut us down. Here we go.